Thanks, Bernie. Good morning. What if 2014 was the year of a regional awakening, where our municipal leaders, unified in their determination to work together, address key regional challenges such as gridlock, jobs, and the gap between rich and poor? Its time is long past due. In a region of 6 million people, a growing proportion of us increasingly leads city-regional lives. We routinely cross municipal boundaries in our daily trek to work, travel, study, or shop. Undoubtedly, we live, work, and play in a highly integrated regional economy. We can address the issues that affect us all without endangering our region's diversity of people and places. The passage I just read is from a Toronto Star article published in February and written by Carol Welding, our first keynote speaker. Whether you keep a watchful eye on the business affairs of Toronto the Good or consider yourself a casual observer, you most likely have seen, heard, or read about Carol. As President and Chief Executive Officer of the Toronto Region Board of Trade, Carol is passionate and a strong advocate for not only the board's 12,000 members, but also for Toronto and GTA. Since taking on the top post in 2007, Carol has positioned the board as an influential thought leader on key business and public policy issues impacting Toronto's regional, global, competitive economy. Through her leadership, the board has enhanced members' benefits by launching a key industrial speaker series, business-to-business networking events, partnered learning opportunities, and business development tools. Carol is the Director of Boards of the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre Foundation, the Royal Ontario Museum, the Greater Toronto Civic Action Alliance. As well, she is a member of Young Presidents Organization and an advisory board member of the Mowat Centre. Before taking the helm of Toronto Regional Board of Trade, Carol served as President of Mount Sinai Hospital Foundation and President of Plan Canada, formerly known as Foster Parents Plan. And for her work with Plan Canada, she traveled extensively in Africa, Asia, Central and South America. For her leadership in not-for-profit sector, Carol received the 2011 Award of Distinction from the Public Affairs Association of Canada and was named to the top 100 list of Canada's most powerful women in 2010. She is a recipient of the Schulich Business School's Outstanding Public Contribution Alumni Award, the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal, and the Public Service Excellent Award for Technology. Carol holds an honors degree in business administration from the Schulich School of Business at York University. So please welcome Carol.
Thank you for the very kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. It looks like you've got quite a full day in front of you when I took a look at the agenda in terms of the topics that you're trying to cover. So thank you for the invitation. I think it's pretty critical that the work of the engineers is so important to our province, to our region, to the city here. And so I think it's a great opportunity to talk about how you can become more engaged in the policy-making process. When I was invited to speak, there was always the possibility of a provincial election, that it could come this year, and so it has, and here we find ourselves, just weeks away from it. What I like about the campaign this year is that the debate is actually about real issues. It is about the economy, it's about jobs, and of course, it's about transportation, one of our favorite topics. All the party platforms are out, and the public is starting to pay attention, or at least we hope that they are. So far, the polls show that it's a very tight contest, and I think if there is to be a tipping point, next week's leaders' debate will certainly be the likely time when that will happen. The heat of a writ period is an interesting backdrop, I think, to your annual conference on advocacy, because at this conference you're going to talk about how can you become more influential or more engaged in that advocacy process, and in particular, what about doing that during an election period. I know at this conference last year, TVO's Steve Paikin, whom I know pretty well, gave you an insider's view of Ontario politics. And as Steve said, Ontario politics can be cyclical in nature, with some parties fading into the background and then coming back with a vengeance. My remarks today are going to take another direction, a bit of a different one. They'll focus on the issues rather than on the particular parties. And they'll consider the question that you guys put forward to me, which is, do election years offer unique opportunities to expedite or launch public policy initiatives? I want to approach the conversation in three ways. First, lay out the non-partisan context in which the board approaches advocacy. Second, explain the four-step approach that we take in terms of the board's advocacy development. And then third, I'll demonstrate how we use this approach in a particular advocacy challenge, and that is the issue of gridlock in transportation. So let me begin with the context. The board has long been an advocate for transportation improvements in Toronto and in the wider Toronto region. In fact, it's actually been an issue that's come up constantly in our 169-year history. So transportation is not obviously a recent challenge. From the location, we say, of key lakeside docks to highways to transit lines. Those are just some of the examples and many others that we've come to understand that show us that advocacy is a marathon, not a sprint. Our perspective, therefore, is very broad, it's very long-term, it has to transcend numerous elections, campaign priorities, promises, and changes in government. Advocating during an election, though, is especially during the writ period, can be a very tricky prospect. You have to keep the doors open beyond the ballot counting. We don't take political sides, we can't. We are strictly nonpartisan organizations, so we don't endorse candidates, we don't endorse parties. What we do is propose ideas and work to develop them and have them adopted by campaigning mayoral candidates or by campaigning provincial party leaders. This applies, of course, in non-election periods as well. To remain partisan, though, we have turned down opportunities to join government-led panels on specific transportation topics. That includes the Mayor's Shepherd Subway panel, the Premier's Transit Advisory Investment Strategy Advisory panel, the TTC panel, and others. All of those panels I've been asked to sit on, and all of them I've declined in order to maintain our objectivity to be a credible voice in those discussions. So we strive to work with government, but we want to remain free so that we can comment, we can critique, and put forward our ideas. As we approach our elections, our objective is certainly to be ahead of the curve. We have spent much time and effort to put key regional challenges, as you heard this morning, and our recommended solutions at the forefront of the campaign. We want to make the issues that matter most to our members become the actual election ballot questions. During recent provincial and municipal election years, we've conducted, as you know, a lot of advocacy campaigns. We had Vote Toronto 2010, which I think was very successful in putting the city finances at the centre of that election. We had our Vote Ontario 2011, and this year's Think Twice, Vote Once Decision 2014 campaign is well underway. They all raise key regional challenges and propose solutions. They were and they are intended to raise the debate and, as we say, keep the proverbial ball moving downfield. Our campaigns ensure that our members are a driving force for our ideas about the region in terms of building prosperity. So how do we at the board approach advocacy to ensure improvement on issues goes forward? We have a very well-defined four-step process that I want to take you through, and then I'll talk a bit about an example. First, we establish clear objectives, understand the problem. So what are the regional challenges that our members are seeking to answer? Second, we build a case. What evidence will get the most traction with government, with the public, and with other stakeholders? Third, we identify a range of solutions. And then fourth and finally, we go out and we strongly advocate for policy solutions that we believe in. The first step is to really define the problem. So what are the critical opinions of our 12,000 members, which are across the region, including other businesses, politicians, and city builders? I have to say, our members are our greatest asset. They are critical stakeholders when it comes to going out to advocate, and they're really important all the way through the process. They tell us what challenges they face, so we conduct annual member surveys. We routinely poll them during the course of the year outside of our annual survey. We have roundtable sessions with them. We have policy committees. So we're constantly in touch with our members to understand what their issues are. It's better to be proactive and understand their issues than it is to be routinely in a reactive position responding to unfriendly government agenda. And I think the key point for us at the board is that our contribution isn't purely self-interested. Good, credible policy has to be in the public good. It's what's good for Ontario, not just what's good for our members. And as corporate citizens, it's something that our members truly believe in. So we're always looking for win-win solutions. It's necessary to understand, as I said, what are our members' objectives, therefore, and align those with public objectives. Once we've determined what the issue is, we have to go out and we have to build the case. And we use fact-based evidence. What evidence do we think will get the most traction, whether it's, again, with government, with the public, or with key stakeholders? My background is a CA, a CPA, so a bean counter, as they say. I spent many years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, so numbers and facts to me matter a lot. And we all know that, as I said, as an accountant, we like to make decisions based on the facts. So it's a discipline that I brought to the policy work at the board. Not to say that it wasn't there, but it was something that we agreed we needed to really ramp up in terms of putting more facts and more evidence behind our policy. So we pursue those as they relate to our members' interest and, as I said, to public policy interest. We changed the basis of our advocacy from more opinion-based to more evidence-based. To pursue evidence-based advocacy, though, you need to do both qualitative and quantitative research, and I've spoken a little bit about that. In particular, 6 years ago, we introduced the annual Scorecard on Prosperity. It's evidence-based. It is sponsored actually by CPA Ontario, and we look at how the Toronto region compares to 23 other global cities across some 30-plus indicators. So there's lots of data in there, and it has obviously a very disciplined approach to gathering the economic facts. It does show that the Toronto region is very much a great place to live and to work. It's safe, it's diverse, it's healthy, we're a well-educated population. But the scorecard also pulls no punches. Very much it needs to look at what aren't we doing very well in, and it does just that. Gridlock, obviously, is one of the critical issues that the scorecard explored. In particular, in 2011, we did a whole transportation lens and put out some pretty startling data in terms of how we are and aren't doing when it comes to that issue. So now that we have the case in terms of the actual facts that are there, we identify a full range of solutions, and that's the third step in our advocacy process. What I think is really important is that we don't rush to solutions, and we very rarely make specific recommendations, but I will come back to that when I talk about transportation and why we felt that was important. The more dialogue and debate on the solution and on the options, we believe, is actually the better, because it means that more people than just us are actually working on the problem. So while we may not agree on all potential solutions, it's necessary to have all of the options on the table. It helps build credibility with a broader range of stakeholders and audiences. And they will invariably become part of the discussion, so you want to be seen as a partner, not as an adversary. It shows good faith on your part in terms of engaging them. Our aim in our work, though, in this is always to be the honest broker with various stakeholder groups. We continue, to convene roundtables. We invite healthy debate throughout the full process. Regardless of whether or not you want them to be a part of the process, the opposition groups will be active. So it's better to have them inside the tent and in the conversation than it is outside. That said, don't be afraid of stoking up your opponents. We do that fairly regularly. Your goal should be to seek a win by the accuracy of the case that you're building. Of course, at certain points, strong advocacy policy solutions or your strong policy does need to go into action and into advocacy, which is the fourth and final stage. The debate can only go on for so long without the issue moving towards an actual lasting solution. So you have to be ready to pick a moment or create a moment to actually advance your solution or idea. Is there a predetermined deadline? Could be a city council meeting when you need to get out ahead of that. Obviously, we're always aware of that. Are you looking to influence party platforms before an actual election? That's when the real work gets done, long before the writ period, in terms of when parties are putting their platforms together. That's a really critically important time to be in your advocacy process. Or is it after an election, the actual right time to advance solutions? As we all know, in the early months and early years after an election, that's when the tough work gets done. That's the easiest time for government to make their tough decisions. So it is a critically important time to be out there advocating. Regardless of when you come out with your recommendations, we find it best to actually put it through a strong report. And as with other steps in the process, third-party support of and contributors can be a tremendous benefit. So this is where our members really come in. In the case of transportation, which I'll speak about, we went out to our members. They'd been engaged in this process with us in a very comprehensive way and asked them to stand behind quotes when we were going to go out on revenue tools. That wasn't an easy process to actually get them to put up their hand and say, I'll put my name and my company's name behind it. It's very different to sit in a room like this and debate and dialogue and say, get out there, Board of Trade, than it is to actually put your company name out. But it is really important to get them out there with you. So as with other steps in the process, as I said, you have to deliver the strong stakeholder support. At the same time, though, don't surprise your government audiences. They have to be kept in the loop so that they don't feel that they're put in an awkward position, and take every opportunity to educate all parties along the way. The launch can be very simple, as I said. It can be an email release, or it can be elaborate as a media event, and we've done both. So now that I've told you a little bit about how our process works, I thought it would be helpful to take you through some of the things that we've done, a couple of the election campaigns, and in particular focusing on the Toronto Region's #1 priority, and certainly our members' priority, which is transportation. So first, the problem. I think we all know it because we live it every day, but we were out there, we were surveying our members, we were in face-to-face meetings with them, and they made it perfectly clear to us. Whether it's about shipping goods and the mobility of goods around the region, whether it's about getting their employees to work on time or getting them home, it is a critical issue. So you've all experienced, and unfortunately, I think it's now become the new norm for all of us to actually work in different ways or in different patterns in spite of the gridlock that's in front of us. We know that it's important for our economy as well in terms of the work that we've done, and that goes to some of the fact-based evidence we've put out that speaks to it's costing our region in the range of $6 billion. CD Howe actually says it's now up to $11 billion annually in terms of the cost to our economy. So as I said, that evidence piece was really critical. Through the research in our scorecard, it made it very clear. The $6 billion I've said to you was a key fact. You'll hear that, and you do hear that referenced a lot. Also, our commute time was another key fact, that when we put that scorecard out in 2011, and it just was a happenstance, it wasn't planned, it was a happenstance when the provincial government came out. The media that was generated as a result of that, it's a 66-minute commute time, was phenomenal. Because what it showed is that we were dead at the bottom of the pack. We were behind LA. And at a time for that report to come out with those kind of data points close to a budget just exploded the issue. So we couldn't have asked for a better time in terms of just getting the data out and getting the conversation way up in front there, above healthcare or above education. And those are tough policy issues to be competing with, but that's where the transportation issue has now finally landed. Once we have our data in place, then we start to go into looking at what are the solutions and what do we want to start to debate on. So the board, as I said, we've been in this issue for a long time. The board was instrumental in getting Metrolinx, which is the regional transportation body. You would all be familiar with them. We were very instrumental, predated my time at the board, in actually getting that body formed. In 2010, as I said, we launched our Vote Toronto 2010 campaign, and our objective there was to focus the candidates on the city's obviously pressing challenges, and finances is one of them. But we, at that point, wanted to push this dialogue on the transportation issue. So we put forward a paper that had 16 revenue tools that could support the $50 billion Metrolinx transportation plan. it certainly solidified the board as a very respected voice. We would be the unusual suspect to put our hands up as a business organization and say you need to put in new revenue tools, code language for taxes, and find a way to raise more money. You would never expect a business organization to do that. And I know in talking to media when I did the interviews, they all said, and I said, look, that's the easy headline. So let's just push the easy headline aside and have the real conversation. And we did. And so we got them to push that dialogue forward. At that point, we weren't endorsing any of the revenue tools that were in the report. Because I said, as our aim back then, it was really just to stoke the debate. It was to get the conversation going. It was to get people talking. And in fact, many of the ideas that were in those 16 revenue tools, we were not supportive of. We didn't think that they were the right tools. But it got us credibility because we needed to go out and get the debate opened up. The media, as I said, pushed at us, and they were constantly asking over a very long period of time, a number of years, when are you going to pick a revenue tool? Are you going to pick a revenue tool? Which one? Because obviously that's what the media wants to do, just to kind of push at the debate and make it more controversial. We were at that time very committed to the debate, and a year later we repeated the same message in our Vote Ontario 2011. So we further demonstrated that our province and our regional municipalities can't fund transportation expansion. We did that in the data and the evidence that we put forward that just shows there is not the fiscal capacity provincially or municipally. You'll actually see us come out with a piece of work in the fall looking regionally at municipal fiscal capacity, and it's pretty startling there in terms of just the money that isn't available even for basic things like state of good repair, let alone expansion. At a provincial level, we all know there's lots of debate, but the reality is, should they be saving dollars on an ongoing basis? Obviously, yes. They should always be culling through their budgets. But when we have an infrastructure deficit like we do of 3 decades, if we don't get this city moving, we won't have the economy that we have right now. And so, no matter which way you look at it, there is going to be some form of new revenue tools needed. Don Drummond's spoken to that. You may be familiar with his work. So there was our biggest challenge, was actually trying to get people and governments to accept this reality that we needed the revenue tools. Our work continued beyond that election cycle, and then finally last year we led the call to action and we advanced solutions. And this is where we got specific. So in March 2013, we put forward a paper as part of our Let's Break the Gridlock campaign. We had some public pieces, you may have seen them out there, with the traffic light, I want to get moving again. But we put forward specific ideas because we wanted to signal to all of the parties after a long period of debate and discussion that it was time to get specific. We put forward 4 revenue tools that our members stood behind. We had a number of our stakeholders giving their support to it. But we also said that we're not absolutist. If it's not these 4, then pick something else. Our main point there was saying no isn't an option. It's easy to say, I don't like sales tax or I don't like gas tax. It's a lot more difficult and a lot more responsible to force other stakeholders to say, so what would you do? Because if you don't want that, you have to do something. And we had earned the right. We'd earned the credibility to be able to push at other stakeholders, including government, to be able to say, you need to do something because we've done our best. We've put our voice forward. Now you have to put your voice forward. So others did follow. The City of Toronto weighed in after we were. The Metrolinx weighed in terms of their ideas. The Premier's Transit Panel, as I said, we were invited and said, no thanks, we don't need to be a part of that. We've put our ideas forward. They weighed in last December. So 2013 was certainly the year of plans, and from our perspective, 2014 does need to be the year of action. In January, I mentioned we launched our Think Twice, Vote Once campaign. We called for credible plans with credible means to address the problems. Transportation funding, of course, is at the top of our list. And I think that our work has been rewarded. Despite some delay, the transit funding has made it into the 2014 budget. We may not completely agree with the way it's presented there, but it's in there, and it's fighting to stay in there and find a way. In this provincial election, all of the parties are speaking to transportation. In the mayoral election, they're all speaking to it. Again, they may not be our complete answer of what we wanted, but the debate and the dialogue is out there, and now it's important for other people to stay inside that discussion. As I said, advocacy is a long game, and I think our work on transportation best emphasizes that. It's an issue, transportation is, that will transcend elections. It will be here for quite a while. But for the board, we use election years to highlight our long-standing advocacy work. But elections have also helped to put it on the map. So that it was included in the budget doesn't mean that our work has ended in any way. We know that we still have a long way to go. And of course, it will remain a focus of our discussions. It has been more than a decade since provincial and municipal elections actually collided in the same year. So we do think it is a unique opportunity to be having a regional conversation, because when you're taking a decision at a municipal level on a mayoral candidate, you tend to look at the services around you. And when you're looking provincially, you're looking at the big issues of, as I said, healthcare, education. Our challenge is to try to say, look regionally. So when you cast your vote at a mayor and you cast your vote at a provincial party, you want someone who understands what they're going to do in the context of moving the Toronto region forward. Because we know, just from the economics, of the contribution that the Toronto region makes to the economy. As Toronto goes, so the province goes, so the country goes. So we're hopefully looking to shape our members and other public to take their decisions in that kind of a context, given this unique opportunity. So just as our advocacy on transit, I said, has transcended elections, other issues will continue beyond the June 12th or the October 27th election dates. And as we've done in the past, and we're doing with our Think Twice, Vote Once, we will continue to put our members' issues forward. Our members believe, as you saw at the outset in the title around this, that we can go from good to great, and our scorecard certainly looked at. We are a good region, but we can be a great region. There's lots of things that we have here in terms of assets and a lot we need to do. But at the basis of that, being a great region, we have to tackle our mobility challenges. So to the question, does an election year offer a unique opportunity to expedite policy or to launch a policy campaign? I think that you can see that elections have certainly afforded us the opportunity at the board to be a very bold voice. And we do hope that this election can be a turning point on our path to greatness. But it is just one part of the very long game that we're all in when it comes to advocacy and when it comes to making the Toronto region a great place to live and to work. So thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning, and I'm happy to, I guess, if you have time for questions.
No, we'll stay here. Thanks. Okay. I heard the phrase stoke the debate a number of times, so I think she's perfect as our opening speaker. With that, we are opening the floor to questions. There is a mic floating around somewhere. If you have a question, sorry, who's got the mic? Oh, right, David's got the mic. The mic will be coming to you. Please state your name and organization clearly, and try to limit yourself to one question. And there's the mic right there. Go for it.
Thank you. Name is Brad Robertson. I'm from ESCO. I'm curious, you talked about avoiding blue ribbon panels and that element of the advocacy side. Just wondering, where do you draw the line to stakeholder panels? Where do you choose to get involved? Do you choose it informally, or do you stay away from the formal invitations? Just trying to see where you draw that line between when you do and when you don't become a part of an advocacy side that is a stakeholder group.
Right. So I would say the key determinant on that is when it's government-led. And because if you're going to go into a government-led panel on, as I said, whether city, provincial, or a government or a body like a TTC, and they're going to advocate, then you, by good faith going in there, you're sitting in a room and you're going to debate and dialogue. But when you come out, everybody has to be aligned. Whether you agree with it or not, you have to be aligned with that. At least that's our philosophy when we participate in panels. So therefore, you need to be really comfortable depending on what they're going to come out with. And if we're doing our own work on that, we don't want to in any way compromise our objectivity. So we won't do it. We just won't. We won't do it. We get asked to do it for the very reason that they want us on side, so that when we do come out, we have to say, well, we support what this transit panel said, and if it isn't aligned, and I think the reason you start to get more of those invitations is if you're doing your work properly, you are becoming a go-to influencer, so they want you on side. It doesn't mean we can't have good dialogue with them, and it isn't a good relationship. It is, but we guard our objectivity and our credibility with, such a fever. I really do have to say that's a big part of who we are. That said, where we do sit on stakeholder panels is when they're not government-led. If we think, to the point of you need to have everybody in that, you're going to have opposition, you're going to have varying points of view. Early in the process, you just have to be willing to listen to the diverse voices, because no one organization, including ourselves, is ever right. We wouldn't be arrogant enough to say it's ours and it's only that. So we do sit in those, whether they're informal, formal, panels, groups, working groups, and we'll stay very much inside that process.
There were a couple of hands up, but the mic's still at the back. Can you come forward with the mic, or? Oh, there it is.
Good morning, Carol.
Hey, Howard.
Great to see you, and thanks so much for coming.
Yeah.
Carol, just be interested, PEO is a regulatory body, so has sometimes trickier role in the advocacy, and specifically some of the issues that they deal with on an annual basis are sometimes technical. We don't see that technical expertise at the cabinet table. We don't see it at the city council table. Engineers tend to take a back row, but they're important to that public debate. How do you see the regulation of engineering getting a higher role in terms of the development of policy before legislation gets tabled? How do you literally get them into the front rooms and out of the back rooms in a way that's meaningful and make sure that their voice is heard in the public interest? Because I think you've made a clear point that it's the public good is most important.
Yeah, so obviously a challenge in a regulatory environment, and we aren't directly in that. Some of our members would be in that. In this case, you are, directly influenced by that. So I think first you have to pick your spots. You have to decide, where as a group do you think your best expertise is? Where do you want to be the thought leader? I remember when I was early in my days in this, someone had said to me, it was a woman, so for all the women in the room, she made the analogy of being the bride, the bridesmaid, or the guest. So do you want to be the bride? Do you want to be the bridesmaid, or do you want to be the guest? That's a very conscious decision. And so similarly, you'd have to take that decision and say, where is our thought leadership? Where do we think we can best contribute? When you're clear on that, you've got to start early in the process, and very much, I would say, in a private route, because advocacy has both, as I've talked about, a private and a public stream. And inside that private stream, there's so much expertise here and thinking. We put out a scorecard on prosperity, and that's now become a critical evidence-based tool to us. What does that look like for you as a group in terms of picking your issue or issues and finding your evidence and your data and being comfortable to put that in there? So that would probably take a little bit of time, and then you do just have to get comfortable to decide when you want to be bold and how you want to be bold. And our members gave us permission to go there and asked us to go there, as did our board. And I think that's because we did our homework in terms of getting our facts and our data on the table to try to take the emotionalism of some of these issues down. And some of them do get extremely emotional. And the data is what takes the emotionalism out. So for the engineers, data and information it's who you are. You have that credibility and that expertise. You just have to decide what you want to pick in terms of putting it out there. And obviously be aware of the regulatory piece. That I can't speak to as much. I'm not as close to that one. So.
Other questions?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom Stevens. I'm from Ontario Power Generation. When I look around on a bad day, it looks as if we don't really do much more than provide cover for government incompetence. We write reports free of charge in some cases, and they file them. And I'm not even sure that they even assign a lackey to look at them in all cases and all. When we have our board of PO with 14 government appointees on it, it looks to me as if they don't even trust us to run our own profession and all. So I'm not sure, when you talked about staying off these government committees, are you not in fact abandoning the most important opportunity we have to establish relationships and to have us taken credibly? You talked about transportation mainly. To me, that's one that's moving forward not too badly. But we have a Green Energy and Green Economy Act in which engineering input was crucial. And what we've now got is an act which identifies greenness with entire technologies rather than with the crucial context of application and all. Anyhow, I guess I came here hoping to get some idea of how we can actually make things work. I've written to just about every politician under the sun that I could find an email address for, and there's no reason to believe that anything much good apart from comforting noises has come out of them. I haven't really seen the impact of engineering the way I'd like to see it in public policy at all.
So you got a lot of pieces in there. Let me try to tackle a few of them. So it's a long game. As I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you have to stay in it for the long game. Lots of frustrating moments, my team will tell you, when we go back, and where we have to bite our tongue at a certain moment in time because we want to take a longer view and we don't want to get sucked into the short-term piece in front of us, and so we don't around an issue. I don't know what the specifics are for you or for the engineers. I can tell you that process, though. So I think that's number one you have to accept. You know, emails are good, but you've got to pick your spots. You've got to get out there. You need to be comfortable to be uncomfortable. And if you are constantly looking for a safety zone, then you won't be able to advance. We've been uncomfortable a number of times, but we always feel if we're doing the right thing, if the evidence is there, if we are really careful about how we navigate through the politics of policymaking, and don't get pulled too far into that policy piece, because our job is, we're not government. I'm not government. It's not my job to do government's role. It is my job to go out and create the right environment and to put things like put the revenue tools on the table, creates airspace for the government to come in when they need to get the rest of Ontarians involved who don't live in the detail of revenue tools and say, I don't want my taxes raised. So, you know, that does require a lot of discipline, bold moments, knowing when to be very privately engaged and who to be in that influencer network. You really need to understand your influencer network extremely well. Who are those key people? And it's not necessarily tons and tons, but there are a few, both within government and outside government, and how to activate that. So those would be a few things I would say. If it's the green energy issue, then that approach, if you apply it over some period of time, I would suggest would yield some results, but it does take perseverance and patience. And I'll be the first one to say I don't have patience all the time. My team will tell you that. But I do have perseverance.
Other questions?
Hey, Carol. My name is Dan Alica, and I am the assistant editor with CanadianManufacturing.com. I just wanted to ask you, you talked about the importance of the election year. Obviously, that's the kind of crux of this presentation, right?
Yep.
But how do you ensure, how does the board ensure, and how can, the people in this room ensure that the transit debate or the transportation debate doesn't kind of fizzle out somewhere between June 13th and October 28th?
So, great question. And, it is in there now, right? It is at a provincial level. I don't think it will actually fade out. Right now it's at a provincial discussion. You see the mayoral candidates. I mean, John Tory put his out a few days ago. But you see a lot of that will lie low until we get through the provincial piece. And then it'll actually pretty quiet over the summer as well. But come Labor Day weekend, it'll just go crazy till October 27th. I don't think the issue will go away. I think it's up to the engineers, because they're such an integral part of that transit and transportation. It's your opportunity as a group to say during that time period, do we want to be ready that when September comes, there is a particular part of the transit and transportation debate that we want to be in as a group of engineers around public policy. And I still think there's lots of opportunity there. You might not be leading in a particular area, but you can look at who are the key stakeholders, who do we want to align with, who shares our point of view, and decide if you want to put the weight of your voice beside that. So I think that's one way from an engineering perspective to continue to try to be in the debate. But I don't actually have a concern that the issue will fall away, because there's just too many pain points out there for everybody around it, both personally and professionally. So I think the issue's unfortunately here to stay, and hopefully sooner rather than later to get some kind of resolution to it.
Hi, my name is Mohamed ElBaradei from McMaster University, Master of Engineering Public Policy. One big question is, have you been in situations where evidence itself becomes the issue getting consensus? Because there's a lot of situations where we are in a world now that it's very easy to get the evidence that supports different opinions or different views, etc. How do you go about tackling that, and within set timeframes, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So we work with partners that we think have the expertise. In the case of the scorecard, we worked with Conference Board of Canada, and they did all of our data analytics, because we're saying, we know, and your point is extremely well made, which if somebody doesn't like the outcome, they're just going to go and attack the research, and they're going to go with the data. And there's always going to be some challenge in it. Even in our case, in putting the scorecard together, if I took you layers and layers back, getting data sets that were comparable at 23 different city region levels was a challenge. And then picking what is the right indicator. So when we first did it, we slogged through that detail over a good number of months, and our members slogged through it in committees. But once we were cycling through it a couple times, we got our feet on the ground. But obviously heavily relying on a conference board as a critical partner. The ICP report that we just did on toward a Toronto Region Economic Strategy, we work with the Institute of Competitiveness and Prosperity. So we worked with their data sets as well in terms of looking at clusters. And I will say that was an area where we did have a lot of debate with our members, because in transportation, they're in it in a particular way, whether it's their employee base. If you're a logistics company or certain companies, you have more of a vested interest. In the case of clusters, which is what are the sectors in Toronto, how well are they doing? Financial services, technology, food and beverage, human health sciences. When we would look at that data and say, well, this is doing really well here, not so well here, they jumped at us, because that's their lifeblood. They're creating wealth, they're creating GDP. Who are we to tell them that you actually aren't doing quite so well? And that goes back to your data. So we had to really sit down and make sure that we listened to it. And on in a couple of sectors, we had to work through some indicators, because it all comes back to maintaining our credibility. If we lose our credibility, then it doesn't matter how great the policy idea is. So at that level, that's a lot of work to make sure that you're aligned there. And that's not front-facing. You're right. That's very much a behind-the-scenes piece of work, and comes out in the front in terms of a credible voice.
Thank you. Jordan Max, PEO. I want to address sort of two ends of the spectrum, which is the heavy evidence-based approach of using the balanced scorecard, and how do you deal with issues of best practices, not just enough to look at the data, but obviously what works in different city regions around the world that you can be able to parrot or pull off and see what is comparable, what's useful to add to the ideation. Sometimes we get very boxed into, this is how we've done it here, this is the space we live in, and we're not able to ideate beyond that. The other end of the spectrum is perhaps less evidence-based, but still valuable and increasingly so, which is crowdsourcing. And we have, where is the voice of the average commuter? Where is the voice of people who want to telecommute, people who are looking at different approaches, and how that will be changing things? And how do you bring these two extremes, or do you try and bring these two extremes into the tent as well?
So on the best practice piece, which is, it's a very important piece of it, and it's something I didn't really speak to, but we do quite a bit in that regard. And so we'll do it, we've done it in all of our transportation work. And some of it is front-facing. In the scorecard, and I don't remember which year it was, we actually looked at a couple of city regions and pulled them out as sort of mini case studies to say, here's best practice. And that does get a lot of attention. We are now working on our next transportation paper, which got put on hold because we actually want to get through the election when this particular piece goes forward. And it's to look at the governance models around how we're working. We look at Metrolinx and say, how well is it working and where isn't it working? And we've had that conversation with them quite extensively, and you would know that we would be out there saying, if we look at the Scarborough subway decision, we say that's an example of bad governance and how not to take decisions when you flip-flop 4 or 5 times. So we know governance isn't working. So the paper we're getting ready to put out has done extensive best practice research and really has 4 models, general models, that will come forward that are based on worldwide looking at a governance model based on your piece around best practice. So we do that a lot, and it's an important part of it. If you have the evidence, you have the best practice, you need to bring those in. The crowdsourcing is an interesting one. I would say we actually haven't done as much formally in that kind of a context. We do go out to try to reach our members in particular and the general public in different ways. And the whole area of social media is just a huge piece that's coming forward. But I would say that one is one we haven't yet explored, and you raise a really important point that it should be considered further in terms of how it supports different kind of policy or advocacy initiatives.
We've got time for maybe one or two more questions at the moment.
I'm from Sudbury, the mining capital of
Yes.
Canada. We consider Toronto the financial mining capital of the country, and in fact, one of the questions I have for you is how do you deal with that? You know, the manufacturing sector, the mining sector. How do you make sure that the wealth creators are there to sustain the other issues that are important to government? The second thing is, how do you interact with public service? The senior public service is the one that has to create the briefing notes and has to advise and all that sort of thing. How do you interact as the Board of Trade? In which ministries do you actually target, and what's your process for making sure that your points are well ensconced in the public service?
So I'll answer that one first. We work extensively with the public servants, and our team does. So we have a policy team. They're in to see them on a very regular basis. We did on some of the work that we've just done in our Think Twice. We were in seeing all of the deputy ministers and doing an extensive briefing. They actually asked us to come in, and so for us that's fantastic. What more could you ask for? But then we'll go in to different ministries, and obviously certain ministries are. You know, finance is really important to us. Municipal affairs is, infrastructure is, transportation, ECDEV. So we'll be into the Premier's office. So we'll be into, you know, there's the political side, but there's also, you know, public servants there. So and at a city level, you know, Joe Penichetti, the whole team there, our team is constantly working with them because they are the ones, to your point, who do all of the heavy lifting. They are the ones who are the constant and who are trying to balance between the political side, and we need to support them. We see ourselves as really, it doesn't mean we'll naturally take their side on things, but I will tell you our team works with them closely. I know a number of them, and they're a highly respected group of people who do a lot of really good work. So thank you for raising it, because they're a really important part of the process. To your question of the mining, the manufacturing, I would say in the cluster work that we're doing right now, and it came out in our scorecard in 2012, and we're now looking at some of it, we do look at the region's economy, and it is extremely diverse. And what are those opportunities? How do we make sure that some of the work that we're doing is setting good policy or setting good business conditions at what we call more of a foundational level for all clusters? Beyond that, there are things that are very cluster specific, whether it be mining that needs to be looked at. But at a foundational level, transportation is obviously one, water, wastewater, energy, some of those pieces, governance. We look at those issues and say those are issues that go across a diverse set of sectors, and we have to be broad in our thinking when we look at those.
I'm going to have to cut it off at that point.